Hi everyone and welcome to a new episode of How I Fixed Your Data. My name is Jonas, I'm the host of the show and co-founder of Koalify, and today we have Jasper with us. Jasper, can you introduce yourself?
Hey Jonas, thanks for having me. So my name is Jasper Meurs and I'm a HubSpot consultant. I've been working in HubSpot for multiple years now, and I think since about a year at this point also started implementing Koalify for different clients, and that's why we're here today.
That's the first time that I have a Belgian guest, so we need to highlight that. How did you roll into the HubSpot ecosystem from Belgium? And I think that you're mainly focused on the US market. Like, why is that?
Yes, well, to answer the first question, how I rolled into HubSpot. So I have been active in consulting, had my own business for a little over 10 years right now. And I played around with like multiple tools during that time. And the main reason for this being is that I started my business while I was studying business management, but I've always been a bit of a nerd and really love tinkering with technology. And this way, like both of those spheres basically matched and came together. I think I first tried HubSpot like in like the early days when they started, and I didn't really like the platform right away, so I just like stopped working with HubSpot for a little bit. Was working with different platforms, and then a couple of years ago I circled back to HubSpot, saw all of the different implementations and features that they added since I last checked out the platform, and I just really loved what they did with the platform. I really still love how fast they are developing the platform, as well as also the ecosystem around HubSpot, which you probably know all too well. It's just a really great platform to work with.
Yeah, sounds great. Sounds familiar as well. Cool. Today we're going to discuss one of your use cases, one of your implementations of how you helped one of your clients fix their data. Could you explain a bit more about your client, what industry they're in?
Yes. So for this client specifically, they have a SaaS product for higher education, mainly focusing on the US market. The product is available worldwide, but our clients, or their clients better, tend to come from the US market. And well, that's also where the challenge presented itself, where we needed Koalify. I don't know if we want to get into that already now, or...
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. What challenges did you experience?
The main challenge we experienced there is that specifically for higher education in the US market, because I don't know how much I've seen this issue in the European market, for example. I haven't seen it myself yet, but maybe you have some different ideas there. Is that a lot of these institutions use subdomains for the departments that they have. So for example, they will have a separate subdomain for math. They will have a separate subdomain for education. They have like different subdomains for all of the different departments that they have. But from the perspective of the product that the client sells, each of these subdomains are basically the same client. But HubSpot, of course, because it's a subdomain, will create separate companies for each of them. So every time that an instructor signs up from a new department, that new company will also get created for that subdomain. Yeah,
that sounds familiar. Like each new subdomain creates a new company. What were they doing before? What was their experience? What issues were they running into before you solved it?
Well, before I solved it, let's just say it was rough. There wasn't really a solution to solve this problem. I think the best thing we came up with before Koalify is just manually merging all of those different companies, but this is like hundreds and hundreds of records that we're talking about. So really not easy to like handle this entire process manually, especially since it's an ongoing process, because new subdomains get created all the time when new instructors sign up through their own app platform.
Okay, that makes sense. And then how did you approach the solution? Like, where did you start? How did you tackle it?
Also, before I get in like how we approach the solution, like one other thing that I want to mention is that because of that, these companies were all, or like these subdomains better, were all spread up in different companies. One of the things that we also started building out is getting the data from their own app within HubSpot. So we get like quality data on how, for example, the adoption is going at a certain institution. But with all of these subdomains, that data was also inaccurate. So we were starting to build out these systems to get a better idea of our customers, of our market, of the implementation at licensed accounts, for example. But the duplicates made it really difficult to get the right information there in the reporting that we were doing on all of those metrics. So that's made it especially important for us to fix those duplicates.
Yeah, and so if I understand it correctly, you were also syncing usage data from their platform into HubSpot.
Yes.
And ideally, each unique account in their platform was corresponding to a unique record within HubSpot as well?
Yes, that's correct.
And I can imagine that if you have duplicate records of a single organization, that it's harder to match. What did you use to eventually match the data or to push the information from the platform into HubSpot as a unique identifier?
So the way that we match the data coming from the platform into HubSpot is always on an instructor level. So there we just use the email address to match the right data to the right instructor, but that doesn't mean that that instructor is also linked to the right company in HubSpot, because they could be part of that subdomain. And before we had merged those subdomains into the main domain, these would be seen as separate institutions, giving us incomplete data when we would pull a report for like the main institution, let's say.
That helps. Thanks for clarifying. So you have this situation with all these different companies that are created for all the subdomains of these institutions. How did you approach it? How did you tackle it?
So before I implemented Koalify, we just used the default duplicates tool within HubSpot. But that still makes it a manual process, which is very labor intensive, especially when it's about that many records. So then when I found Koalify, I started setting up our duplicate rules there. And also we had the primary rules to basically mark the primary records that we wanted to keep within our system. And this really like sped up the entire process for us.
So you went from a manual solution to a more automated solution, and you referred to like our duplicate rules and our primary rules already.
Yeah.
Could you maybe share which ones you set up for this
Of
specific
course.
challenge?
So let me share my screen here. So I'll first show you the duplicate rules that I set up here. They are fairly basic. So as you can see here, we're only using it for companies so far because that's the main challenge for us. As you can see, there's also still a number of duplicates in here, and that's because I'm using a phased approach to do all of the merges. I'll show you a little bit later on how I set up the workflow, and then you can also see how I approach that phased approach. And this is more of like a quality assurance thing, let's say. I don't want to just like press the button and merge all of them at once, which technically with Koalify I can perfectly do. But I do want to do some manual spot checks in between to make sure that everything is going as I intend the merges to happen.
Yeah, I understand, especially since you have a lot of duplicates. Doing a phased approach is always a good idea to do some validations first.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, that looks clean on the duplicate rules. And then on the primary rules?
So then for the primary rules, I did do a couple of special things there. So I created a custom one here, and the first thing that we check on is if the company has an active license with us. So if there's an active license, we want that company record to be the primary record. And next, we talked about subdomains. So what I did next is I created a new property for the domain name length, and then we're marking the one with the smallest domain name length as the primary one, because that will be the one that does not use a subdomain.
Yeah.
So that's like a little custom one that I did here.
Nice approach.
Next, we check which one of the duplicates has the largest number of associated contacts, because that's also the one that will have the most data for us. And then last, we'll check the one that was created first. But we would rarely get to this last one, actually.
Yeah, okay, so this helps you prioritize the record. If I understand it correctly, in the first place, you want to merge into the record that has an active license, that is a customer. Then the one with the best domain name or the shortest, ideally
Yeah,
not one of the domain or not one of the subdomains. And then the biggest number of associated records, so the one with the most records associated. And then usually you'll probably never end into that last backup create date. Clear? That
exactly.
gives you a nice primary duplicate that you merge into.
I'll also quickly show you how I did the domain name length. I have that right here, because that is a little bit of a custom setup that I did here. So this is just the calculation fields where I check the string length of the company domain name, and then I can use this to find the shortest domain name, aka the one that's not a subdomain.
Yeah, that's a great approach. Love the workaround. Very simple but powerful.
Yes, sometimes the most powerful things are the simplest ones.
Yeah, nice. And then you mentioned in the workflow, so you do faced automated merges. Could you explain a bit more? Yeah.
So this is the workflow that I've set up here. I think the first part here is probably something that you will see quite often, where we just check whether there is a duplicate, and also making sure that the ones that enter the workflow are not the primary duplicates. Then we check for the different duplicate rules that we want to match on. And then here you can see the last two here are part of my phase approach. So in the first phase now, I want to do all of the company records that do not have an active license with us. So I really want to focus there. And then next, I'm using the create date to do the phased approach from there. So each time I will change the create date a couple of years back or 1 year back. So for example, the next time I will run this will probably be December 31st, 2022. Mm-hmm. And then I get a new batch of records that I can merge. And then I can spot check those, see if everything is still working as I've designed it to work. And if there's any issues, I can fix those before we continue the merging process. So far, everything is going perfectly fine. That's also my expectation going through this process. But I'd rather check a little bit too much in between than find some errors after I merge a database of a couple of thousands of records.
Yeah, it's always good to do quick validation checks and to also have the control to do that and not just set it to auto merge everything. Because I can see that you have a split there in the workflow as well with a task, so you're not merging everything automatically.
So this is one of the simpler splits that I've used so far, but it's still very useful for me. Mm-hmm. And this split here specifically, I'm checking if they ever had a license and if any of the companies entering this workflow ever had an active license, even if they don't have an active license right now. I do want to manually check them before continuing with the merge. And that's where I use this task that gets assigned to myself so that I can then manually go in and check these. For reference, for other Koalify implementations that I've done, I used a more detailed branching system based on the duplicate rules. Mm-hmm. And then the rules where I'm most confident, those will go through automatically. And then the ones where there's less confidence, in my opinion, for that specific account, those will get a task assigned to then complete the merge manually.
That way you can combine automated merges for the certain duplicates and do the more delicate cases manually by getting the task and then manually reviewing the records and using the CRM cards on the records. Cool.
Exactly.
Nice overview. And with this implementation, what were the results that you've experienced for your client?
Well, I would say I don't know if surprise is the right word, but it was a very big surprise for them, for lack of a better word, that we were able to manage all of these merges so fast. Because it's something that had been a huge issue for them for a couple of years already. So once I created this automation, and they told me, for example, NYU, we do see a lot of subdomains there, can we get this fixed? And a couple of minutes after they sent the Slack message, it was fixed. And they were whoa, that was fast. What happened here? So yeah, they're very happy with how fast we've been able to manage these merges, and also how it has improved the quality of our data since, because of course we get way better insights now into how certain accounts are doing, which is really valuable data for customer success as well.
Yeah, nice to hear. And do you have an idea of how many records you roughly merged?
That's a very good question. I lost count at this point.
A lot, a lot.
It's definitely a lot of them, yeah.
Okay, nice. Cool, glad to hear. And what are some of the lessons that you've learned? What are the things that you take away to your next projects?
Well, I would say the building out the branching is definitely something that I've taken away for like any implementation that I'm doing going forward. Since I do think it's important to sometimes keep the automation in check, and where I'm like less confident about the automatic merge, to have that manual check in place. And that's definitely like one of the bigger lessons that I take away here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking if there's like any other lessons for this one specifically. There's one other thing, and that's what if you like know the educational landscape in the US. There are some institutions that are like part of a system, and in that case the subdomain is not a department, but the subdomain is actually a different institution within a certain system. So the main domain would be the system and the subdomain would be the institution. And for those, we don't want to merge them together because they're actually seen as separate schools, and we want separate data on those as well. So that was an interesting challenge here, and a bit of an edge case when I first started, because also like once you've done a merge, like you know that at least right now it's pretty difficult to undo a merge. It's something, judging by the way that HubSpot started structuring their data recently, I think is down the pipeline that they will enable undo merges at some point. But right now it's not possible. So unfortunately I did do a merge on one of those like system schools, to call it that way. And then you get into the whole process of like exporting that data, remarking the data in an Excel sheet, importing it again to then recreate the right connections, and link the right context to the right companies again. That's definitely a lesson I take away here. And then once I noticed this, and this is also again why I'm really happy that I used that phased approach. So once I noticed that this was an issue, I then implemented a property for them, a custom property, to mark whenever a company is part of a system, or, well, a company, to use the name as it's used in HubSpot. For us, that's institutions. So whenever an institution is part of a system, which I will now use going forward to make sure that we do not merge those together. So that's a solution for that one.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach. So if I understand correctly, you will have a custom property to flag these system institutions or system schools, and then you can use that property in your duplicate rules, probably just to avoid that we flag them as potential duplicates if they are such an institutional school or company in that case. Okay, cool, that helps. And indeed, I've heard as well that unmerging is coming, not in the very short term, but with the API updates and the data structure update, it should be possible. Let's hope that this comes available maybe after inbound, we'll see. Cool.
Ever hopeful. It would definitely be a good addition to the platform.
We get those questions occasionally as well, and we've shared the feedback as well with the HubSpot product team, because we can try to build a workaround for enabling unmerging for Koalify merge that happen, but it should generally be available within the HubSpot platform, in our opinion. Another point of feedback that we've shared is reporting on your merges. We could also build a workflow with Koalify, but it would be great if it is just a native feature that within HubSpot you can see all the merges that you did. Cool. I think that's a great success story. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we close off this episode?
No, I think that was it from my side. Thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it, and it was definitely fun talking through this use case.
Likewise, thanks for joining us, Jasper. Thanks for watching this other episode of How I Fix Your Data, and stay tuned for more